Admiral Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, staring at the massive display screen in front of him. His hands gripped the metal railing so tight that his knuckles turned white. What he saw made his stomach drop like a stone falling into deep water. 3,000 enemy ships had just appeared at the edge of the solar system. They came out of hyperspace in perfect formation, like a wall of death moving toward Earth. Each ship was twice the size of his biggest battleship. Some were so large they looked like floating cities made of dark metal and glowing red lights. "Captain Morgan, give me the numbers," Harrison said. His voice stayed calm even though his heart was beating fast. Lisa Morgan looked up from her station. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Sir, we count 3,012 enemy vessels. Their smallest ships are bigger than our largest cruisers. The flagship is over 15 miles long." Harrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. He commanded the entire human defense fleet, but they only had 200 ships. Even a child could see that this was not a fair fight. "What about their weapons?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. But based on reports from the colonies they destroyed, we think each of their big ships has more firepower than our entire fleet combined." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of computers and life support systems. Every person there knew what those numbers meant. They were looking at the end of humanity. On Earth, President Kevin Walsh sat in the emergency meeting room, deep under the White House. The room had no windows and thick concrete walls. Around the long table sat the most important people in human space. General Amy Foster sat to his right, her uniform covered with medals from a dozen different wars. She had never lost a battle, but today her face looked grim. "How long do we have?" President Walsh asked. "At their current speed, they will reach Earth in 72 hours, General Foster replied. "They are not trying to hide or be sneaky. They want us to see them coming. They want us to be afraid." Dr. Nathan Blake sat at the far end of the table. He was a thin man with gray hair and thick glasses. Most people in the room had never seen him before. He worked on secret projects that even the president did not always know about. "What about our colonies on Mars and the outer planets?" Walsh asked. "We are bringing everyone back to Earth," Foster said. "All civilian ships are heading home. We will make our last stand here." Walsh looked around the table at the faces of his advisors. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. All of them looked like they knew they were about to die. "Dr. Blake," Walsh said suddenly, "you have been very quiet. Do you have anything to add?" Blake looked up from the papers in front of him. Behind his glasses, his eyes were sharp and alert. "Mr. President, I think we should discuss Project Nightfall." Most people at the table looked confused. General Foster leaned forward. "Doctor, I do not think this is the time for theoretical discussions." "It is exactly the time," Blake said quietly. Back. In space, the Draconian fleet moved through the solar system like a slow tide of death. On the flagship, a creature that looked like a giant lizard wearing armor sat on a throne made of black metal. This was Overlord Kethrin, commander of the Draconian Armada. Kethrin had conquered 17 star systems in the past 10 years. Each time was the same. His fleet would arrive, demand surrender, and then destroy anyone who refused. No species had ever defeated the Draconians. No species had even hurt them badly. "Science Officer Vex," Kethrin said in a voice like grinding stone. "Tell me about these humans." Vex was smaller than his commander, but just as ugly. His scales were green instead of black, and he had 4 arms instead of 2. "Lord Kethrin, the humans are a young species. They have only been in space for about 300 years. Their technology is very primitive." "How primitive?" "They still use fusion reactors for power. Their ships move using simple chemical rockets. They fight with projectile weapons and basic energy beams. By our standards, they are like children playing with toys." Kethrin made a sound that might have been laughter. "And their numbers?" "Maybe 50 million humans total across all their colonies. Their main fleet has less than 200 ships. Each of their ships is smaller and weaker than our scouts." "Then why did we bring the entire armada?" Kethrin asked. "Because the Council wants to make an example of them. When other species see what happens to those who refuse to surrender, They will be more likely to submit without a fight. Catherine nodded. This made sense. Fear was a useful tool. It saved time and resources when enemies gave up before the fighting started on Earth. The emergency meeting was still going on. Dr. Blake had asked everyone except the President, General Foster, and himself to leave the room. Now the three of them sat alone with just the quiet hum of air conditioning. "Explain Project Nightfall," President Walsh said. Blake opened a thick folder and pulled out photographs. They showed what looked like mining equipment on various moons and asteroids. For 50 years, we have been building these installations throughout the solar system. Everyone thinks they are mines or research stations. What are they really? Foster asked. Defense platforms. Each one contains weapons that no other species has ever seen or imagined. Walsh stared at the pictures. Why was I not told about this? Because the project required complete secrecy. Every president for the last 50 years has known, but only when the time was right. Today is that time. Foster leaned back in her chair. Are you telling us that we actually have a chance against the Draconians? Blake smiled for the first time in the meeting. General, we have more than a chance. We have been preparing for this day since we first learned that hostile aliens existed. The question is not whether we can defeat them. The question is whether we are ready to show the galaxy what humanity really is. Outside, the Draconian fleet continued its slow approach toward Earth. They had no idea that they were flying into the most carefully prepared trap in galactic history. They thought they were about to destroy a primitive species that had barely learned to travel between planets. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who lets you think you have already won. Admiral Harrison walked through the corridors of the Terra Nova, checking on his crew. Everyone was busy preparing for what they thought would be their final battle. Engineers worked on weapons that seemed too small to hurt the massive Draconian ships. Pilots ran practice drills in fighters that looked like toys compared to enemy vessels. "Admiral," Captain Morgan called from behind him. "All ships are in position around Earth and Mars. The civilian evacuation is complete." Harrison nodded. "Good. Make sure every ship captain understands the plan. We hold the line no matter what. Even if it looks hopeless, we keep fighting." Morgan studied his face. "Sir, do you really think we can stop them?" Harrison looked out through a porthole at the stars. In the distance, he could see the red glow of the approaching Draconian fleet. "Captain, sometimes the most important battles are not about winning. Sometimes they are about showing the enemy what kind of people they are fighting." What Morgan did not know was that Harrison had received new orders an hour ago. Orders that came directly from Dr. Blake himself. Orders that told him to make the coming battle look as real as possible, even when it was not. On Titan, one of Saturn's moons, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark stood in a control room that did not officially exist. The room was buried deep under what looked like a simple mining operation. For 20 years, Clark had worked here, maintaining equipment that he was told never to use unless the world was ending. Today felt like the world was ending. "All stations. Report ready," said technician Betty Jones from her console. She was young, maybe 25, but she had trained for this moment her entire adult life. Her fingers moved over controls that could do things most humans could not imagine. Clark pressed a button on his communication panel. "Command, this is Titan Station. Project Nightfall systems are online and ready for activation." The voice that answered was Dr. Blake himself. "Ryan, you have done excellent work. Today, the galaxy learns what humanity really is. Are you ready?" "Yes, sir. We have waited long enough." In the secret meeting room on Earth, Dr. Blake showed President Walsh and General Foster a map of the solar system. Red dots marked the locations of Draconian ships. Blue dots showed human vessels. But there were also green dots scattered throughout the outer planets and asteroid belt. "What are the green dots?" Walsh asked. "Our real defense network," Blake replied. Each green dot represents a weapons platform that has been disguised as a mining station or research facility. We have been building them for 50 years, using technology that no other species possesses. Foster pointed to the map. There are hundreds of them, 437 to be exact. Each one contains weapons that work on principles the Draconians cannot understand. When we activate them, their entire fleet will simply disappear. Walsh shook his head. If we have had this capability all along, why did we let the Draconians destroy 17 other civilizations? Why did we not help those people? Blake's expression became serious. Because we needed to study the enemy. We needed to understand their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. Every species they conquered gave us more information. It was a terrible price, but it was necessary. On the Draconian flagship, Overlord Kethrin watched the human fleet through his viewing screen. The primitive ships were arranged in defensive lines around the blue and green planets. It looked like a child's drawing of a space battle. They actually think they can stop us, Kethrin said to Science Officer Vex. Lord, their behavior is puzzling. Most species surrender when they see our full fleet. These humans seem to believe they can fight. Perhaps they are too stupid to understand how outmatched they are. Vex studied his instruments. Lord, I am detecting some unusual energy readings from the outer system. There appear to be installations on various moons and asteroids. What kind of installations? They look like mining operations and research stations. Nothing that could threaten us. Kethrin waved a clawed hand dismissively. Ignore them. Focus on the fleet around their homeworld. That is where we will end this quickly. What the Draconians could not see was that many of the human ships were not what they appeared to be. Captain Morgan stood on the bridge of what looked like an old cargo transport called the Liberty Bell. To enemy sensors, it was just a civilian ship that had been pressed into military service. The weapons it showed were small and weak, but hidden inside the Liberty Bell was technology that could tear holes in space itself. The ship's real engines could cross the galaxy in minutes. Its true weapons could turn an entire planet into dust. All disguised vessels report ready, Morgan said into her communication device. The response came from dozens of ships throughout the system. Ships that looked like freighters, passenger transports, and research vessels. All of them carried enough firepower to destroy the Draconian flagship. Back on Earth, Dr. Blake received a message that made him smile. Gentlemen, our deep space monitoring stations report that the Centauri Alliance and the Rigel Federation are watching this battle very carefully. They expect to see humanity destroyed in the next few hours. What will they actually see? President Walsh asked. They will see the Draconian Armada simply vanish from existence. No explosions, no debris, no distress signals. 3,000 ships will just stop existing, and then they will have to ask themselves a very important question, which is, if humanity can make an entire armada disappear without a trace, what else can we do? General Foster looked at the tactical display again. Doctor, are you certain this will work? If something goes wrong, we will all be dead in a few hours. Blake adjusted his glasses. General, human scientists solved the basic principles of dimensional physics 40 years ago. We have been testing these weapons on remote asteroids for decades. The Draconian fleet is about to discover that there are some things in the universe more dangerous than superior numbers. As the hours passed, the Draconian fleet moved closer to Earth. They broadcasted threats and demands for surrender. They showed images of the civilizations they had destroyed. They promised quick death for those who submitted and slow torture for those who resisted. The humans appeared to ignore these threats. Their small fleet stayed in formation around Earth and Mars. Their communications were filled with what sounded like desperate battle preparations and final goodbyes to loved ones. None of the Draconians suspected that they were sailing into the most sophisticated trap ever created. They could not imagine that the primitive species they were about to conquer had been watching and waiting for this moment for decades. In 6 hours, the real battle would begin. But it would not be the battle that anyone expected. The 72 hours were up. Overlord Kethrin sat on his throne aboard the flagship and looked at the primitive human fleet waiting for him. The small ships were arranged in neat lines between his armada and the blue planet Earth. They looked like children's toys ready to be crushed. Begin the attack, Kethrin ordered. His voice echoed through the command center of his massive ship. 3,000 Draconian vessels moved forward like a wall of death, their weapons charged with energy that could melt entire cities. Red beams of light shot across space toward the human ships. Admiral Harrison watched the enemy fire approaching on his display screen. "All ships, return fire," he commanded through the communication system. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that looked weak and outdated. Blue and white energy beams shot toward the Draconian ships but seemed to do no damage at all. The enemy shields absorbed the attacks easily. "Direct hit on the cruiser Boston," Captain Morgan reported. "They are showing heavy damage." Harrison nodded. The Boston was not really damaged, but they needed to make it look real. Advanced holographic systems made it appear that the ship was burning and losing air. To enemy sensors, it looked like the Boston was about to explode. On the Draconian flagship, Science Officer Vex watched the battle with satisfaction. "Lord Catherine, the human weapons are even weaker than we expected. Their ships are being destroyed easily." "How long until we reach their planet?" Catherine asked. 4 hours at current speed. We should have their entire fleet destroyed within 1 hour. What neither of them knew was that hidden throughout the solar system, ancient machines were waking up. On Titan, Lieutenant Commander Clark pressed a series of buttons that had waited 50 years for this moment. "Titan station to all Nightfall platforms," Clark said into his microphone. "Dr. Blake has given the order. Activate all systems on my mark." Across the solar system, 437 hidden weapons platforms came online. They had been disguised as mining equipment and research stations for decades. Even the humans who worked at these places did not know what they really were. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, what looked like a simple ice mining operation suddenly revealed its true nature. The ice melted away to show a machine the size of a city building. Strange blue energy began to flow through tubes and cables that seemed to bend space around them. Similar machines activated on Ceres, Vesta, and dozens of other asteroids. On the moons of Saturn and Uranus, research stations opened like flowers to reveal weapons that worked on principles no other species had ever discovered. "All platforms report ready," Technician Betty Jones called out from her station on Titan. Clark looked at a countdown timer on his screen. "Mark in 3, 2, 1, mark." The first Draconian ship to vanish was a destroyer on the edge of their fleet. One moment it was there, firing its weapons at a human cruiser. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space where it had been. No explosion, no debris, no flash of light. The ship simply stopped existing. Science Officer Vex stared at his instruments in confusion. "Lord Catherine, we have lost contact with Destroyer Unit 774. "What do you mean, lost contact?" "I mean it is no longer there, my lord. It has disappeared from all sensors." Before Catherine could respond, 10 more ships vanished, then 20, then 50. All across the Draconian fleet, massive warships were simply ceasing to exist. "What is happening?" Catherine roared, rising from his throne. Vex frantically worked his controls, but his instruments gave him no answers. "Lord, I do not understand. The ships are just gone. There is no evidence they were ever destroyed." On Earth, Dr. Blake watched the battle from his secret command center. Screens showed the positions of every ship in space. Green lights marked each Draconian vessel that had been eliminated by the hidden weapons platforms. "How does it work?" President Walsh asked, staring at the display in amazement. "The platforms use dimensional displacement technology," Blake explained. "They do not destroy the enemy ships. They move them to a parallel dimension where they cannot harm anyone." "Are the crews dead?" "No, Mr. President. They are alive, but trapped in a pocket universe of our creation. If we choose, we can bring them back later." General Foster shook her head in wonder. "In 50 years of military service, I have never seen anything like this." Back in space, the Draconian fleet was falling apart. Panic spread through their communication networks as more ships disappeared every few seconds. Some captains tried to retreat, but the dimensional weapons could reach them anywhere in the solar system. Overlord Catherine watched his mighty armada shrink before his eyes. Ships that had conquered entire star systems were vanishing like soap bubbles. "All vessels, emergency retreat. Return to hyperspace immediately." But when the surviving ships tried to jump to hyperspace, they found that they could not. The same technology that was making ships disappear was also preventing them from escaping. Captain Morgan stood on the bridge of the Liberty Bell, which still looked like an old cargo ship to enemy sensors. "Admiral Harrison, should we reveal our true capabilities now?" Harrison's voice came through the communication system. "Not yet, Captain. Let them think we are still fighting with primitive weapons. We need to maintain the illusion until the very end." More Draconian ships vanished. Within 2 hours, the mighty armada of 3,000 vessels had been reduced to less than 500. The survivors clustered around their flagship, trying to protect their commander. "Lord Kethrin," Vex said, his voice shaking with fear, "we have lost contact with over 2,000 ships. Whatever weapon the humans are using, we have no defense against it." Kethrin looked at the display showing his remaining fleet. "This is impossible. Our intelligence said they were a primitive species with crude technology. Perhaps our intelligence was wrong, my lord." For the first time in his long career of conquest, Overlord Kethrin felt real fear. He had always been the predator, the one who brought terror to other species. Now he was the prey, and he did not understand how it had happened. On Titan, Lieutenant Commander Clark watched the tactical display as more green lights appeared. Each light represented another enemy ship that had been moved to the pocket dimension. "Dr. Blake, we have eliminated 90% of their fleet. Should we finish them off?" Blake's voice was calm and steady. "No, Ryan. Leave a few ships alive. We want survivors to tell the story of what happened here. The galaxy needs to know that humanity is not as helpless as we appear." In the space around Earth, the human fleet continued to fight with their seemingly primitive weapons. To anyone watching from far away, it looked like a desperate last stand by an outmatched species. No one could see the real weapons that were actually winning the battle. The Draconian Armada, terror of 17 star systems, was about to learn the most important lesson in galactic history. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has been pretending to be weak. The battle was over. Where 3,000 Draconian ships had once filled the space around Earth, now only empty darkness remained. A few hundred enemy vessels had escaped the dimensional weapons, but they fled toward the edge of the solar system, in complete panic. President Walsh stood in the underground command center staring at screens that showed the aftermath of the impossible victory. "Dr. Blake, I think it is time to tell the galaxy the truth." Blake nodded and pressed a button on his control panel. "Send the message to all galactic governments. It is time for humanity to step out of the shadows." Across known space, alien leaders received the same transmission. It came from Earth, but the technology used to send it was far more advanced than anything humans were supposed to possess. The message could reach star systems hundreds of light years away in mere minutes. On the planet Zentara, home world of the Zentari Federation, Prime Minister Glex sat in his government chambers reading reports about the battle. The Zentari had always considered humans to be a weak species that might make good servants someday. "This cannot be correct," Glex said to his military advisor. "The reports say that 3,000 Draconian ships simply vanished." "Yes, sir. Our long-range sensors confirmed it. The entire armada just disappeared." Before Glex could respond, his communication system activated. The image of a human woman appeared on his screen. She was wearing a military uniform with insignia he had never seen before. "Prime Minister Glex, my name is Captain Lisa Morgan of the Terran Space Command. I am requesting permission to meet with you and your government." Glex stared at the screen in confusion. "Terran Space Command? We have never heard of such an organization." "That is because we have been using a different name when dealing with other species. You know us as the Earth Colonial Administration, but that was just our public face." On the planet Rigel Prime, Admiral Thorne of the Rigel Federation Navy was having a similar conversation. He had just finished reading intelligence reports about humanity's primitive technology when a human appeared on his communication screen. "Admiral Thorne, this is Admiral Jake Harrison of the Terra Nova. I believe we need to talk." Thorne looked at the human's uniform and the ship visible behind him. Neither matched any human technology he had seen before. "Admiral Harrison, our records show that humans do not have the rank of admiral. Your highest military leader is called a general." Harrison smiled. "Admiral, your records are based on what we wanted you to know. The truth is quite different. Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers were learning that they had been completely wrong. On Earth, Dr. Blake prepared for the most important presentation of his life. Representatives from 12 different alien governments were gathering in a conference room that most humans did not know existed. The room was deep underground, protected by technology that could survive the destruction of entire planets. The first to arrive was Ambassador Crix of the Altarian Empire. The Altarians looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and large black eyes. They had always considered themselves superior to Earth humans because of their advanced mathematics and science. "Dr. Blake," Crix said as he entered the room, "we demand an explanation for what happened to the Draconian fleet." Blake gestured to a chair at the long conference table. "Please sit down, Ambassador. You will have your explanation, along with everyone else." One by one, the other representatives arrived. There was General Voss from the warrior clans of Proxima, a species that looked like armored bears and respected only military strength. There was Scholar Nim from the Academic Council of Vega, whose people had developed the most advanced computers in known space. When everyone was seated, Blake stood at the front of the room and activated a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with Earth at the center. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Blake began, "for the past 300 years, humanity has been conducting the largest intelligence operation in galactic history." The alien representatives looked at each other in confusion. Ambassador Crix spoke first. "What do you mean by intelligence operation?" "I mean that everything you think you know about humanity is wrong. We have been pretending to be a primitive, weak species, while secretly studying and infiltrating every major civilization in the galaxy." Blake pressed a button, and the holographic display changed. It now showed the true extent of human space. Instead of a few dozen colonies around Earth, there were hundreds of worlds scattered throughout the galaxy. "Our real population is not 50 million, Blake continued. "It is over 50 billion. We have been establishing hidden colonies for 2 centuries, always careful to make them look like something else." General Voss stood up from his chair. "This is impossible. We would have detected such activities." "General, 3 of your top military advisors are actually human agents. They have been feeding us information about your battle plans and technology for the past 15 years. Voss sat down heavily, his face showing shock and anger. Scholar Nim raised one of her forearms. "Dr. Blake, if your technology is so advanced, why did you pretend to be primitive?" "Because we needed to study the galaxy without being seen as a threat. Every species we encountered was either hostile or wanted to control us. By appearing weak, we could observe their true nature, without triggering wars or alliances against us." Blake changed the display again. Now it showed images of human agents working throughout the galaxy. They were disguised as members of other species or hidden among refugee populations from conquered worlds. "We have agents in every major government, every important military organization, and every significant research facility in known space. We have been quietly preventing wars, curing diseases, and solving resource problems while you all believed we were struggling with basic space travel." Ambassador Crix leaned forward. "Why are you revealing this now?" "Because the Draconian threat forced our hand. We could not allow them to destroy more civilizations while we maintained our disguise. The time for hiding is over." Blake pressed another button, and the display showed advanced human ships emerging from hidden bases throughout the galaxy. These vessels were sleek and powerful, nothing like the crude ships other species had seen before. "This is our true fleet," Blake said. "Each ship contains technology that makes draconian weapons look like stone axes. We have mastered dimensional travel, matter conversion, and consciousness transfer." The room fell silent as the alien representatives tried to process what they were hearing. Finally, General Voss spoke. "What do you want from us?" Blake smiled. "We want to offer you a choice. You can join the Terran Protectorate as equal partners in building a peaceful galaxy. Or you can continue with your old ways of conquest and expansion, knowing that humanity will be watching and judging your actions." "And if we choose the second option?" Scholar Nim asked. "Then you will discover that there are consequences for threatening innocent civilizations. The Draconian fleet learned this lesson today. They are not dead, but they will remain in dimensional imprisonment until they prove they can coexist peacefully. Dr. Blake looked around the room at faces showing fear, anger, confusion, and wonder. The galaxy is changing whether you want it to or not. The question is whether you will change with it. 6 months had passed since the day the Draconian Armada vanished. The galaxy was a different place now. Species that had spent centuries fighting each other were learning to work together. Fear of conquest had been replaced by hope for a better. Future President Walsh stood in his new office aboard the space station Unity 1. The massive station orbited Earth and served as the headquarters for the Terran Protectorate. Through his office window, he could see ships from dozens of different worlds docked at the station's many ports. "Mr. President," his secretary announced through the communication system, "Admiral Clark is here for your meeting." Ryan Clark entered the office wearing the uniform of the Terran Protectorate Navy. The young man who had once hidden on Titan was now one of the most important military leaders in the galaxy. His promotion had been fast but well-earned. "Ryan, good to see you," Walsh said, standing to shake hands. "Tell me about the liberation missions." Clark activated a holographic display that showed a map of former Draconian territory. Green dots marked worlds that had been freed from slavery. "Sir, we have liberated 43 planets in the past 6 months. Each world contained millions of beings who had been enslaved by the Draconians. How are they adapting to freedom? Better than expected. Many of these species had given up hope of ever being free again. When our ships arrived and broke their chains, some of them thought we were gods." Walsh smiled. "I hope you corrected that impression." "Yes, sir. Captain Morgan has been leading the integration efforts. She explains to each species that we are just people who believe freedom is important. We offer them technology, medicine, and protection, but we do not ask them to worship us." On the planet Kepler 7, former slave camps had been turned into schools and hospitals. Lisa Morgan walked through a medical facility where human doctors worked alongside alien healers to treat diseases that had been ignored for decades. "Dr. Phillips, how are our patients today?" Morgan asked a human doctor who was treating a group of blue-skinned children. "Much better, Captain. The nutrition supplements you brought from Earth have eliminated the deficiency diseases that were killing them. In another month, these children will be completely healthy." Morgan nodded and moved to the next room, where a classroom full of young aliens was learning to read and write in their own language. For years, the Draconians had forbidden education, wanting to keep their slaves ignorant. "Teacher Yex, how are the students progressing?" Morgan asked the alien woman who was leading the class. Yex had once been a Draconian science officer, one of the few survivors from the Armada. Instead of being punished, she had been offered a chance to help repair the damage her people had caused. "Captain Morgan, they learn very quickly. These children are hungry for knowledge after being denied it for so long." Back on Unity Station, Admiral Jake Harrison met with representatives from the major galactic powers. The Zentari Federation, the Rigel Navy, and 8 other governments had all joined the Terran Protectorate. Only a few species had refused, choosing to remain independent. "Admiral," said Ambassador Crix, who now served as the Zentari representative to the Protectorate, "our scientists are still trying to understand the technology you have shared with us." Harrison looked at the clean energy generators that Earth had given to the Zentari worlds. "Ambassador, those generators will provide unlimited power for your civilization. No more strip mining planets or burning fossil fuels." "How do they work?" asked Scholar Nim from the Vegan Academic Council. "They convert matter directly into energy using dimensional resonance. It is perfectly safe and produces no waste products." General Voss leaned forward in his chair. "Admiral Harrison, my people are warriors. We need to know how to defend ourselves if someone attacks us. General, the Protectorate fleet will defend all member worlds, but we are also sharing defensive technology with your people. Force field generators and healing devices that will protect your soldiers without causing harm to others. On Earth?" Dr. Blake worked in his new laboratory at the Institute for Galactic Advancement. The facility was no longer secret. Scientists from dozens of species came here to learn about advanced human technology and share their own discoveries. "Dr. Blake," called Professor Zane, a young human scientist, The Altarian mathematicians have solved the quantum tunneling equations you gave them. Excellent. That means we can start teaching them about faster-than-light communication without using hyperspace. Blake walked to a window that looked out over the Earth's surface. The planet looked different now. Cities glowed with clean energy, and the sky was clearer than it had been in centuries. Advanced technology had solved most of humanity's environmental problems. His communication device chimed. "Dr. Blake, this is Admiral Harrison. We have received a message from the outer galaxy. It appears that another hostile species is moving toward our region of space." Blake was not surprised. "How far away are they?" "About 50 light years. They call themselves the Void Hunters. Our deep space sensors show a fleet of unknown design heading toward the former Draconian territory." "Do they know about us?" "Unknown. But based on their trajectory, they will reach Rigel space in about 2 years." Blake smiled. "Admiral, I think it is time to test our new alliance. Send a message to all Protectorate members. Tell them we have a new challenge to face together." In the pocket dimension where the Draconian fleet was imprisoned, Overlord Kethrin sat in a cell that looked like a comfortable room. Human guards brought him food and allowed him to read books about the civilizations his people had destroyed. "Kethrin," said the guard, a woman named Kelly Brown, "Dr. Blake wants to speak with you." Kethrin looked up from the book he was reading. It was about the Altarian children who had been killed when his fleet destroyed their world. "What does he want?" "He wants to know if you and your people are ready to join the galaxy as peaceful citizens." Kethrin closed the book and looked at his hands. Once, those hands had given orders that killed billions of innocent beings. Now, they shook when he thought about what he had done. "Tell Dr. Blake that many of my people are ready to change. We have learned much about the harm we caused, but some of us may never be able to live peacefully with others." Kelly nodded. He expected that answer. The ones who want to change will be given new lives and chances to help repair the damage. The ones who refuse will remain here, where they cannot hurt anyone. Back on Unity Station, Admiral Harrison stood in his ready room looking at star charts that showed the true extent of human exploration. Red dots marked systems where automated probes had been gathering information for decades. Blue dots showed hidden human colonies that were now revealing themselves to the galaxy. "Sir," his aide announced, "Captain Morgan is requesting permission to take a diplomatic mission to the Andromeda Galaxy." Harrison smiled. "Approved. It is time to see what our neighbors in the next galaxy have been doing." As he studied the charts, Harrison thought about how much had changed in just 6 months. The galaxy that had once been ruled by fear and conquest was becoming a place of cooperation and growth. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together to solve problems and explore new worlds. But Harrison knew this was just the beginning. The universe was vast, and there would always be new challenges to face. The important thing was that now they would face those challenges together, with wisdom, strength, and the knowledge that no species had to face the darkness alone. Outside his window, ships from a dozen different worlds prepared for missions of exploration and rescue. The age of conquest was ending, and the age of cooperation had begun. The galaxy would never be the same again.